We've been talking about a lot of different techniques and approaches and ways we think about evidence to try to help us make the case for Christianity. I want to give you 3 in this session, so we're kind of putting some of these together. So get ready. Are you ready? The first is rather simple, although some of you might be excited about the possibilities or have an interest in conspiracy theories. Let's face it, movies and novels about conspiracy theories are incredibly popular. And sometimes this claim is made against Christianity, right? Well, couldn't they all be just gathering together to lie about this, to manufacture this claim about the resurrection? Well, if that's the case, this would be a vast conspiracy, right? Well, as somebody who's actually worked, investigated, and filed cases involving conspiracies, I want to show you how unreasonable and how difficult it is to pull off a successful conspiracy. As a matter of fact, if you think you know a successful conspiracy, by definition, it wasn't successful. Now, you can pull off successful conspiracies, but you need these 5 principles. You need these 5 things in order to pull it off. So I guess what I'm basically doing in this session is teaching you all how to lie. You ready? You need these 5 things. First, you want the smallest number of co-conspirators. It's not hard to figure out, right? 2 people can tell a lie and keep a secret better than 22 people. 2, you want to hold the conspiracy for the shortest period of time. It's easier to tell a lie and keep a secret for a day than it is for a year. 3, you may not think of this, you want excellent communication between co-conspirators, right? Because at some point someone's going to ask questions, and if you don't know exactly what your partner is going to say, or what he's already said, or she's already said, you're going to be in trouble. So you want to be able to communicate back and forth in all kinds of detail to make sure your stories line up. 4, if you've got a close family relationship, well, then you've got a better chance of pulling off a conspiracy. Strangers don't basically lie for each other as well as family members, for example. 4, you want to have no pressure. If no one's asking any questions or applying any pressure, then you can tell a lie for a long time. Now, think about this for a second. You know those 5 things are necessary to pull off a conspiracy successfully. If you're suggesting that the Christian story is simply a vast conspiracy, then those 5 things have to be in place. Really? How many people are telling this lie? Is it 2? No. Is it just, Peter, James, and John? No. Is it just the 12? No. There's 120 in the upper room in Acts 1, right? Who all allegedly saw the risen Christ. Paul says in 1 Corinthians 15 that 500 people saw Jesus arise from the grave, saw him after the resurrection on the same day. So how many people are involved in this? It's already way too many people. If that's all I knew, I would say it's not reasonable. But it's worse. How long do they have to hold it? Remember, shorter is better. Are they holding it for 6 seconds or 6 minutes or 6 hours or 6 days? No. 6 weeks, 6 months, 6 years? No. 6 decades. You want me to believe that over 500 people told that lie, kept that conspiracy together for 60 years. Really? Well, could they communicate with one another? They couldn't use social media to talk to each other. They couldn't call each other on the phone. They're separated from as far as Thomas in India to Paul in Rome. How are they able to keep the story so consistent given the vast distances that existed between each other with no way to call to see what the other people are saying? Well, okay, well, there's some family relationship. Well, yeah, there was Andrew and Peter. There was James and John, but there weren't a lot of close family relationships. As a matter of fact, Matthew, who wrote a gospel, is nobody to the other 11. He wasn't part of the discipleship of John the Baptist. He was a guy named Levi who was a tax collector who comes into the group late. Yet he writes a gospel, is martyred for his testimony, and he never flinches. How do we explain that kind of thing? And finally, were they under any pressure? Well, I think the deaths of the disciples are pretty famed. I'm not sure that all of them died precisely as the legends would tell us they died, but we do know this. There is not a single claim from antiquity in which any of the original eyewitnesses ever changed their story. None of them ever recanted. If you're going to suggest this is a conspiracy, at least know enough about conspiracy theory to see why that's so unreasonable. Now, let me give you another important principle that is really, I think, for a lot of people, a critical principle. It's this idea of, well, when do I know, Jim, that I've got enough good reason to believe something is true? When is enough evidence enough? This all comes down to the standard of proof, right? What is the standard by which we could say we really think we have enough reason to believe this has been proven? Well, the standard is different depending on the kind of trial you're involved in. If you're in child custody hearings, that's a very different standard of proof. I've actually listed 4 levels of standard in your participants guide. That is the level we try to achieve, in the most critical level, the level we reserve for the most critical trials, felony trials, murder trials, is this standard we call beyond a reasonable doubt. That's the highest standard we have. You'll notice in my list that I've given you in your participants guide that there is no standard called beyond a possible doubt. That is not a standard we hold in jury trials. As I said before, you can't get beyond a possible doubt. You really couldn't. I could always raise some crazy possible doubt. And that's why we don't have it as a standard in criminal trials. What that means is that there are going to be some questions in a criminal trial that I can't answer for you as the prosecutor's side or as the defense attorney's side. And I will typically pick juries and pick jurors by asking that question up front during the selection process. We'll say, hey, are you the kind of person who has to have every question answered before you could be certain that something is true? Well, yeah, I think I am that kind of person. I do think I need every question answered. Well, then you're excused. I can't put you on a jury because I will not be able to answer every question. I'm going to ask you to make a decision, even though you have less than complete information. Can you do that? Well, it turns out you've been doing that if you've been living on planet Earth. We always make decisions without all the facts at hand. We can't be all-knowing. So you have to be willing to make a decision even though you may have some rather large questions unanswered, especially in jury trials. I had one case, for example, where I knew he had killed his wife, but we had no body. He got rid of the body. So I couldn't tell you how he killed her, when he killed her, where he killed her. I couldn't tell you how he moved her body, how he moved her car. I couldn't answer any of those questions for the jury. They still convicted him, and he even confessed later at sentencing. So I know he's the right guy. Yet I could not answer some of the most critical questions. If you think you can't be a Christian unless you can answer every question, you're not thinking clearly on this issue, because you could never hold to any truth claim if that was your standard. Have a reasonable standard. Know when enough is enough. Now, I've got to also prepare you for something that sometimes I think Christians are not prepared for, especially young Christians. This idea that although we hold this claim to be true, and we can make a case for why it's true, there's somebody on the other side of the issue who can also make a compelling case. As a matter of fact, I think people are shocked the first time they hear what appears to be reasonable offer made on the other side against Christianity. And that maybe they've never heard this objection before. Maybe they never knew it could be stated so articulately or so winsomely. And this book has been written by a scholar, and he's saying it in a way that seems very kind, but he's really writing about how Christianity isn't true. And the fact that they didn't even imagine you could write it this well seems to be enough to shake their confidence. Look, we have to be prepared for an attack. We have to be prepared that the other side is going to be... Look, I've never had a jury trial where we spent 6 weeks making the case, positively, that we think is good enough reason to believe that this defendant has committed this crime. We're on one side of the table. The defensive team's on the other side of the table. And at the end of our presentation, I've never had a defense team stand up and say, oh my gosh, that was so compelling. There's nothing we can say. We just rest. No, they're going to spend now 6 weeks of their own making a compelling case for the opposite position. And by the way, I've had that happen only to have at the end of the trial, the jury find the defendant guilty and the defendant then to confess. So clearly that 6-week presentation they made was not true. I don't care how winsome it was, how well prepared it was, how qualified the experts were they called in. They made an articulate defense, none of which was true. We only know that now because the defendant has confessed. So here's my point. Be ready for that. You're going to hear a very articulate defense of the other side. It doesn't make it true. The fact that somebody can offer an alternative explanation does not make it a reasonable refutation. Keep the distinction in your mind. There's all kinds of alternatives that could be offered. I've even drawn a diagram in your participants guide that shows you the ways that defense attorneys typically attack a case. And by the way, you'll always know the strength of your case when you see what it is the defense is so vehemently attacking. They're going to attack most viciously the thing that is strongest about your case. They want to get rid of that because that'll cloud the decision-making for the jury. So don't be surprised when the historicity of Jesus is under attack. One of the strongest things about our case is the historicity of those accounts. So they're going to attack that because they know if they can defeat that, they can defeat it all. Be ready for the attack. Remember, the fact that it can be articulated well does not make it true. Okay, so we've talked about 3 skill sets to put in your call-out bag. You may have noticed if you're following along the Cold Case Christianity book that we haven't yet talked about the chain of custody. That's coming, so hold on. But we've talked about 3 things that I think will help you going forward. Number 1, you have to be able to resist conspiracy theories. Understand what makes a successful conspiracy. Help other people understand it as well. That'll take care of a lot of this problem. 2, you have to know when enough's enough. What is the standard of proof and how do we reach it? And 3, you have to be able to articulate or be ready for an attack when it's articulated well by somebody else. Don't be surprised or shaken that the other side can make a very winsome claim. Those 3 things will help you to defend what is true.